Got it. Says recording in progress. Anyway, I decided to write this book when I retired 5 years ago. And I had been working as a clinical psychologist for over 50 years. And I asked myself, what did I learn working with all these different people for all these many years? 50 years is a long time, as you all, I'm sure, are aware of that. And I had worked with all kinds of people. I had worked with homeless people. I worked with one judge, many lawyers, MDs, et cetera. So I ran the gamut of people that I worked with in terms of their socioeconomic backgrounds, professions, et cetera, races, sexual orientations. And the first thing I thought of was, people are fundamentally very much the same. And they're the same in terms of their psychological needs. They're the same in terms of their need for love. They want to matter to other people. Their need to be successful at something, whatever it is, whether it's plumbing or writing books or whatever it is. And they are very similar in terms of their defenses. They're similar in terms of their fears. All of us are afraid of rejection. We're afraid of being assaulted. We're afraid of being humiliated in front of others. We're afraid of losing control, et cetera. But then I thought, most people know this, that we're all fundamentally the same. So what is it that I learned in these 50 years that's different from what's out there in the popular culture? And so I spent some time 5 years ago thinking about that. And then the pandemic came along, and that helped in terms of writing books, that's for sure. I had a lot more time than I had prior to that. And so among the ideas I had that are, as I said, that I learned that are different from what's out there, one is that positive thinking isn't always helpful. And I thought about that a long time because many of the clients I saw were very much into some kind of a symptom. They had a symptom of one kind or another, and they were into, not thinking about it, keeping a positive face, et cetera, looking at life through rose-colored glasses, et cetera. And often in working with them, it was very clear that once you got to the bottom of what was going on and why they had panic attacks, for example, that underneath it, there were feelings that were not processed. So I came to the conclusion that unless you deal with your negative feelings resulting from disappointment or failure, for example, or rejection, those are the three biggies. Unless you process those, they are going to haunt you in some ways. So that was one thing I thought about. I thought about also in terms of anger. There's so much anger in our society currently. And anger, however, especially for people who are inhibited, is a lot more helpful than sadness, for example. And I worked with one man who was a catatonic schizophrenic, and he hadn't spoken for weeks. And his first words upon coming out of his catatonia were, "Madness is better than sadness." And when I asked him, I said, "Harold, why is madness better than sadness?" He said, when you're mad, you can do something. And when you're sad, you can't do anything at all. So anyway, so I started to think about when is positive thinking helpful and when is it not. For example, I thought, what had I learned? I learned that romantic love is often just a fantasy, especially at the beginning. And that's why so many people are disappointed. You fall in love with a part of a person, your ideal, or what you hope for, et cetera. But often it's very disappointing when you get to know the whole person. The Hindus have a great idea. They believe that if you first you marry, then you'll fall in love. And some of the early research indicated that feelings of being in love often are much stronger later on than they are at the beginning. And in India, whereas it's the opposite here in our country, they're very strong. Feelings of being in love are very strong here, and then they go down very quickly. I learned also, narcissism, we talk about narcissistic personality disorders, et cetera. Well, not all narcissism is bad. When you can enjoy yourself, whether when you look good, when you write a good book, when you have a great success, when there's a great deal of pleasure with that, that's a positive. And so the distinction between unhealthy narcissism and healthy narcissism, I think, is very important. I also learned that vulnerability, somebody once asked me if I liked all my clients, And I answered, yes, I had. And I was wondering, is that true? And it certainly was true. The people I saw came in because they were vulnerable and in pain. And you can relate to other people's pain easily. Whereas when somebody comes in arrogant and boastful, it's a turnoff. And that kind of behavior is very intimidating. So that was clearly one of the things I learned. What else did I learn? There were a number of other things. Vulnerability, as I said, was one thing. Luck or chance was one of the big ones for me in terms of understanding that you can work very hard and be quite talented and yet not get the job you want or not get something very positive. And why is that? We call it luck, chance, or fate, whatever you want to call it. And it's often because of the competition you're facing. You may be the best qualified for a particular job, but absolutely, the boss may have his eye on his favorite cousin or whomever it is, or the competition may be much greater than you've expected or endured in the past. So anyway, as a result of some of the insights I felt I learned over time, I put them all together into this book, which is a series of 8 essays, and they have sort of provocative titles like "You Can't Control Anybody" or "Positive Thinking Isn't All It's Cracked Up to Be," as I mentioned earlier, etc. So anyway, the book is Beyond Pipe Dreams and Platitudes: Insights on Love, Luck, and Narcissism. So it's out there, and I feel pleased with it. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about how do you choose a good book. And I was thinking about my own experiences in terms of choosing a good book. And one of the first things I wanted to mention, I think for me, and we'll talk about for you, how you choose good books. But for me, I choose them via my book club. And I'll tell you a little bit about it because it's one that has worked for 25 years or so. I haven't been a member of it that long. And I choose books that I read also on the basis of awards. And there are lots of different places in this country where different kind of awarding bodies. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Also, there's online, these great places now called, some of them are called Biblo Oracles. There's one in Chicago. I'll talk a little bit about that. It's amazing. They come out in the Chicago Tribune once a week on Saturdays with a whole list of suggestions, etc. There are lots of things online also, as I said. Bookseer is one that's very, very popular. Which Book is another one that's very popular, etc. But let me tell you a little bit about our book club, and then I'm going to open it up to you. I'm not forgetting, but before we get started on those specifics, what is a good book for you? And that was one of the questions I thought as I was preparing for this. For me, a good book is something that's riveting and I can't put down. It's something that's engaging. I like the characters very much. I like the plot line is believable to me. That's extremely important. So I think I also like to learn something from a book. And when I can say afterwards, boy, I learned something about trees, or I learned something from you about Iraq, or I learned something about Saudi Arabia, or wherever, that's a plus. But for you, what's a good book?
Let's start with Colin Plummer. So,
Yes.
Colin, so what's a good book? But before answering the question, introduce yourself first and tell us a little bit more about the book you've published. All right.
Okay. My name is Colin Plummer, and I always thought that dealing with current events, I do have a marketing degree from Temple, like it means something. But I always like to deal with current events, and what's going on right now is the most interesting thing that you could ever deal with as far as your interests. And so since I had such a wild, experience throughout my life, and some of the things that are happening right now has something to do with my book. Whereas I had developed 2 life-saving products with Johnson & Johnson since the 80s. And both of those have something to do with breathing. I made a card. I helped with a pack. I was an extruder specialist in chemical engineering. I was a lab assistant, and I always worked with PhDs and doctors in research and development in kidney dialysis field. And so I was an extruder specialist, and thank God for the education that they gave me, or the knowledge in that field, working for Johnson & Johnson. We developed a plasmapheresis membrane, and I didn't even realize how big it was at the time. When they took my laboratory notebooks to the patent attorney in New Brunswick, we built a $3 million pilot plant, which would be a $100 million pilot plant right now. We went through animal clinicals, human clinicals, and all they did was just lay me off. And that was just 40 years ago. We modified the formulation and made an oxygenator membrane. That's every time they put you under, if it's a Johnson & Johnson product, I have something to do with that. Let alone.
But you should feel proud of that.
Oh, I am intrigued because I'm a person of the Lord. And I just couldn't believe, and this is through the years it transpired, like no more than about 10 years ago, I started noticing these plasma banks. And I said, I made a plasmapheresis membrane with Johnson & Johnson. And I said, this is nothing but the birth of that, okay? So I said, man. And then I started looking at all these open heart surgeries, or anytime they put you under in a hospital, if it's a Johnson & Johnson product, I helped out make the oxygenator membrane. So I said, I have a lot to do with what's going on right now, as far as the virus is concerned, as far as the oxygen that needs to be put into the blood. And so people are trying to breathe, and what really, really spunked me, because it's all about timing as far as sales is concerned. And then when they choked George Floyd on the ground and had 10 minutes to choke the life out of him with his knee on his neck, with his hand in his pocket, this really made me flip, knowing what I had done in the 80s. So this is also current. You see, if I was to ever release that after they just, oh, by the way, J&J, all they did was just lay me off. They didn't even give me a luncheon. But luckily, I always took pictures. And I always had the first bench lab study, blah, 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 and everything else. And then when they laid me off, since I was skillful, I ended up working for Johnson Campbell Soup as an analytical chemist. See, I always know, since you're a person of color, in order for them not to look at that, become technical. So you're more added value. So that always was my gain to fame. Even though I was getting my degree in business administration, Johnson & Johnson and Campbell Soup paid for my education. And I'm also a product of the '60 riots. I was in 7th grade. See, all these current events that came, and it's all about time.
Is this part of your book?
Yes.
Yes,
yes.
This is all. So your book is an
that's what I'm trying to
autobiography.
say. And I have so much things in there that is going on right now that this country needs, this world needs, okay? Because if they realize all what I'm saying to you, because when I said, I don't know how somebody could watch them choke that man on the ground for 10 minutes, because that's when I said, no, my brother, I am my brother. And then what happened after that? I'm watching, see, I was a big time track runner in high school. I have a 2x4 national records, and a 4x2 and a 4x4. And Jesse Owens gave me my medals at the Spectrum when we broke a national record. And I was the main one that had happened. So I was big time in track, big time in football, big time in basketball. My brother went to Nebraska University. So I have a lot of things. And so I said, I need to write a book. And so, because of all the current events. And so it took a while for it to transpire. But since there's current events that people are dealing with right now, I know it would be interesting for everybody, especially when they realize, because I had in my book, when did slavery started, when did colonialism started, reason why it started, and the mindset to keep us like it is right now. Because if you look at this plain, simple thing, you understand the reason why we are right now. And when I say I make you think outside the box, meaning the fact that many years ago, before Christ, there wasn't all this land. I mean, wasn't all this water. So therefore, people were able to migrate. And everybody knows that the creation of man comes from somewhere in Africa or Egypt or whatever. So it had to be a person of color. So number one, people
We're
got
going
to
to have
start
to,
doing.
we're going to have to move on though, I think, because.
Okay, as you could tell. Okay,
Okay,
I make this very simple question, and then you'll understand where I'm coming from. Before Christ, and then a certain set of people went into caves. When you lose your pigmentation in a cave, you come out with silk hair, the eyes of color would be green or blue, and that's how people became white. Okay, and so really, you have an African caveman that came out the cave that considered everybody of color 2/3 of a man. And isn't that what's going on right now? That's when they started colonialism and racism. I mean, colonialism and slavery. Right now, we have the same thing with this black on black crime, and that puts people in jail because of manipulation of putting guns out there on the streets. And then you have all of this stuff that's going on. So I have all that current events in the book. All you have is just different people doing the same thing. Putin is doing the colonialism over there. And so I have that, and it makes you think. And it makes you think, and it makes you have a solution to this.
What is it?
They did it back in the 60s.
So for
They
you,
had
a
an
good
equal opportunity employment program because you got to motivate the black men. And right now we have 5 generations of black men that have no fathers in the household. So when you have something like that, and they have no leadership of a male role model in the home, that's why you have all this going out here, because of the fact that they don't have no guidance and they don't even know where to go. I had my father and mother in the house. So you could keep on going. And that's the reason why we're doing it right now. So you have about 5 generations.
I think you have a lot of good points, but I think there are other people in the group who need.
Okay, as you could tell, it gets very interesting, and I have solutions to what's going on right now, believe it or not.
I can feel the emotions, Colin, definitely. Again, the title of that book is Know My Brother, I Am My Brother, correct?
Gotta read it. Everybody.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
In terms of that's certainly a good book, and you're saying that you're interested in current events. For the rest of you, what makes a good book for you? Is there anything special that you look for? Go ahead.
Yes, let's have Mr. Batwell.
I think the most important thing to me is that, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I think the most important thing for me is that I'm different after having read the book than I was before. There are books that I put down because they're not engaging me because nothing's going to change. And there are books that engage me.
Yeah, I understand. Now, for me, that's something important also, that I learned something about a different country, a different time period, a different whatever it is. I agree with you about that. Also, in terms of current events that you had mentioned, I think that's extremely important. I think for me, characters have to be quite engaging. Go ahead. You got your hand up.
Yes. Okay. Well, what I would like to share is a good book. It depends on what genre that you're actually looking at, because you can read a good fiction, and it can just be relaxing. It can be one of those things that you just read to enjoy it. And then there are your reference books, like the one that Colin was talking about. Basically, what he's talking about is nonfiction, something that is, it's relevant to today. It was relevant to yesterday. It was relevant all the way back into Abraham's day back in the Old Testament, because Slavery and a caste system has been around forever, and it will be around, unfortunately, as long as humans, we dehumanize each other. But a good book, depending on, let's say that I want to read something that is just for entertainment. Now, there are people that might want to read a good book and they want reference for entertainment. That is their entertainment. Some people are, that it depends on what you personally like. And truthfully, I guess I go back to the cartoon comic book days, because when I was a kid and I read comic books, it was the pictures on the front that drew me to the book first. Color, things like that. And then when you read the synopsis on the back of what the story's about, if that's not engaging to me, I'm not going to read the book no matter what the picture is. But if what the back says, okay, this book is about this and this and this, then that's what I want to read, whether it be a reference book, whether it be a book of nonfiction. My mother used to read historical romance, and she loved it because it talked of history of different eras, and she would go, did you know such and such and such? And I'd be like, well, no, I didn't. So she would actually learn things even from historical romance that, who would have thunk that you would learn something from romance stories? You think, it's love stories. You don't learn anything there.
You're absolutely right. No,
but that's what I think of a good book, is something that is going to be pleasing to me, that I am going to be informed, whether it be in a relaxing way or whether it be in a cultural, enlightening. It's all good like that.
Yeah.
That's what you call instant connection, right?
Yes.
Like just seeing the cover, you can feel that connection right away, and you just don't want to let go of that material and just finish reading it.
That's true. It really it grabs you, it engages you. It kind of speaks to you in some way, in terms of, it resonates with something that's important to you. I agree with you. One of the nice things about a book club, I was saying there are a variety of ways we choose good books. I've been in this book club for about 15 years, and the book club has been running for 25 years. Wow. And during the pandemic, we met via Zoom, but when the pandemic is sort of over, we've been meeting in person at a restaurant. And what's nice about the book club is that we are exposed to books that I would never have picked up and that turn out to be very meaningful to me. And I looked at our book list. At the end of the year, everybody's involved in picking the books for the following year. We each pick a fiction and a nonfiction, and then everybody votes on these, and we try to alternate fiction and nonfiction. And all of us take turns being the discussant, and the discussant is simply the person who sort of moderates the book discussion and has a brief bio about the author, how many books this person wrote and awards, etc., and also raises some questions. And the questions can be as general as, did you like the book, or how did you find the book, or which character was engaging, or whatever, or what was most meaningful about the book. And we've had, as I said, the book club has been going for so long, and there are people who come in and out. Some people have moved away, some people have died, but we've had people during the Zoom time coming from as far away, I'm in Chicago, as far away as Pennsylvania and New York, etc. So we've it's been a very good group. Some of the books, I just looked at the book list we had, I just want to mention a few. We read Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty. That's Anderson Cooper's family. That was fascinating. The Alienist was one of these old-time whodunit serial killer types that was just excellent. Born a Crime, which was Trevor Noah's book about how he grew up in South Africa and what that was like for him. And that was really very meaningful to me. When the Apricots Bloom, that was all about Iraq and what was going on at the time of Saddam Hussein. It's a wonderful story about three women and their friendship. Clara and the Sun, that was the one that surprised me the most, because it was written by a Japanese man, of course, and translated into English. It's about an artificial friend, and who provides, of course, all of the humans' needs.
Am I supposed to see myself in here?
I beg your pardon? Are you having trouble hearing me?
Oh, is this Peter?
Yes.
Yes, we can't see you yet. You might want to go ahead and turn on your camera first.
Well, it's on as far as I know.
Oh, okay. How about this? Yes, Peter, we actually are just discussing, what makes a good book, right? So,
Well,
or how do you
yeah, we
choose a good book?
sort of moved on to
Mhm.
how do you choose a good
Yes.
book?
How
Uh,
about you, Peter? How do you choose a
Personally,
good book?
I like a book that will be pleasing in reading it, but also informative. I like to learn something when I read a book or when I write a book. And if I am pleased with the story, but I've also learned something that will make me more knowledgeable or a better person, then I think it's a good book.
mhm. I totally agree. There's no doubt
Good.
about it. I had mentioned Clara and the Sun is one that, I would never have picked up because I'm not a science fiction buff. But this one was fascinating. And I had to reflect on what makes a good friend. And, we expect so much of friendships and from our romantic partners. And I was thinking artificial partners might be the way to solve this. However, that's never going to work. But it's an extremely interesting book, and it won the Nobel Prize for Literature. This last year, what did we read? That was fascinating. The Nickel Boys, and that's won the Pulitzer Prize. That's Colson Whitehead. He's the only person in recent years that's won the Pulitzer Prize twice. He wrote The Underground Railroad and The Nickel Boys, which was a fascinating book. The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich, we read that. And that was, she writes about Native Americans. So you learn a great deal about the Native American culture. And then The Overstory was another one that won the Pulitzer Prize by Richard Powers. And those were fascinating books. All of the Overstory is a lot about trees and preservation of the environment. And again, that's something I would never have picked up were it not for the book club. I think
So-
people have, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Dr. Piorkowski, it really depends on the reader's personal taste and what is his purpose, of reading a book. Say, for example, for Peter, he would rather be more informed, right? So it's more of an educational, informative type of materials that he's into, while Bobby is more of, being entertained, right?
Right.
I would love to hear from John.
Me?
How about
Okay.
you, John?
Well, I've been listening to all this, and my thoughts on this is, I think of two books. The first one is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I was in
Yes,
college.
yes.
I had to read that for the English class. I didn't like it at all. It wasn't my type of book. But when I finished it with the last chapter, I liked it because and the last chapter kind of, for me, put it all together.
It's here.
Now, conversely, I picked up just recently To Kill a Mockingbird. Everybody says it's such a great book.
Mhm.
I read the first 3 chapters 3 times. I couldn't get into it, so I gave it to my brother-in-law. He read it a little bit, and he gave it to my sister. She liked it. So books are unique. Everybody's got a different preference for what they want. You just can't nail it down and say this or that. It's kind of universal in its function.
No, you're absolutely right. And something that you would love, I might hate, and vice versa, in terms of, and very often when you read the reviews, that's what you see. You see somebody says, oh, this was the most terrific book in the world. And somebody else says, I couldn't get beyond chapter 1.
Dr.
One of the-
Piorkowski, I have a question for John.
Sure.
Yeah, because John, you mentioned earlier that you started not really, drawn to the book, but then, at the last part, you were like it already grabbed your attention. My question is, what made you continue reading it up until the last, page? If,
Because in
if you
college,
felt. Mhm.
I need to get a good grade.
You were
Okay, there you
pragmatic,
go.
huh? You're- No, that's a good question. Sometimes you read out of duty or responsibility, or you're just curious as to how this is going to all turn out. That's for sure.
There was another book in that class called Goodbye Columbus by Philip Roth.
Right.
And I read that book from beginning to end, and I thought it was great. So it's just a matter of preference sometimes to how the writer writes and how he appeals to you and what the subject matter is. And everything either flows one way or the other. And that's how I look at books.
Mhm.
I don't judge a book by its cover. I try not to.
I see. One of the
So-
things that I have found helpful in terms besides book clubs, as I was mentioning before, because you do read in a book club books that other people. Go ahead. Somebody else has their hand.
Go, Dr. Batwell.
No, why don't you go on and I'll go on, finish.
Go ahead, Dr. Batwell.
Okay, I never had experience not reading a book. It was kind of ingrained into me as a child that if I picked up a book and I started reading, that I had better get through it. I have only allowed myself to not finish a book within the last 10 years, and it's been quite liberating. I mean, it's meant to be funny, but the thing that allows that I find that allows me to put down a book is whether the author has treated me in a reliable and authentic fashion. That he's not just throwing stuff at me, expecting me to accept his viewpoint. He's arguing his viewpoint one of several ways. He's coming at it from what he should perceive to be a comely, seductive fashion, because he's got to seduce me. He's got to seduce me to his point of view. And it's not up to me to seduce me to his point of view. So that has been very liberating for an old geezer.
You're not the only one.
Well, that's good. No, and in terms of individual taste, there's no doubt about that, Frank. I think everybody has their own particular need as well as interest in terms of what they're looking for, whether it's entertainment, as you said, Bobby, or whether they're looking to be informed. Some of the interesting things online that help in terms of choosing a book are things like Bookseer. I don't know if any of you have looked at that, or Which Book. I clicked on those when I was doing some research for this topic. And actually, they're kind of interesting in terms of what they ask you what you enjoyed recently, and then mention a couple of books that fit into that particular genre. What is that? The two sites I mentioned were Bookseer.
Bookseers.
SEER, and Which Book, WHICH book. Click on those. They're different sites. In our Chicago, we have Chicago Tribune as our newspaper. We have another newspaper, but that's the major one. And they have book recommendations from the Bibli Oracle. And the Bibli Oracle comes on every Saturday. And any of you can submit your last 5 books to it. And then the seer or wise person selects your following book for you if you wanted to pursue something like that. And it would send a list of your last 5 books to books@chicagotribune.com. And what they do, some of the stuff is interesting. As I said, it comes out in the paper every Saturday. And they take these 5 books, like The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, Who is Maud Dixon, The Joy and Light Bus Company by Alexander McCall Smith, The Man Who Died Twice, The Lincoln Highway. And then they have an analysis. I'm getting a feedback. Can you hear it?
We can still hear you though. I do
Okay.
have a question for everyone. Does any one of you here who creates a personal reading list?
I didn't hear what you said.
Anyone here who creates a personal reading list? Okay, so we have
Cousins,
Bobby, we have Kimmy, we have Dr. Botwell. Okay, how about you, Edward? No, you don't. Okay. Mackenzie, do you create a personal reading list? Okay. And let's hear it from Marlene. Marlene?
Yes. I think for me, especially recently, I've been a lot of focused on books that really inspire you to do change. And so a lot of my books have been like authors like Thich Nhat Hanh and Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, in that genre, which is very much what contributed a lot to the book I wrote, which is called Can You See What I See? Envision a Better You and a Better World. And what I've done there is I've kind of incorporated changes, personal changes that somebody can make for resilient and joyful living. And, we spoke earlier about the challenges of the times we're going through. But in reality, every generation has been through their own set of challenges. So I felt having a book that, because all the years of working as a psychotherapist, it was kind of like part psychotherapy, part coaching. And so people wanted to leave with something. What do I do? Okay, I know what's wrong, but what do I do? So ultimately, the idea of writing a book was suggested many times. And now there's a book with all these different tools and guidelines, and many of the things that were spoken about earlier in terms of rejection. And then to make it a bit more entertaining, it comes with stories. So you get a concept and then you do a story, and there are quotes as well. So it's very easy reading, user friendly as it's called. And so as a result, many of the books that I aspire to, come from that genre. And once in a while, I'll have a treat and I'll read a nonfiction, but still, it's usually something that's kind of uplifting. So that's kind of my take on for doing a good book. As was said earlier, it has a lot to do with the genre. And I think certainly we're very fortunate now because you can go online and you can read the reviews. You often can go ahead and look at synopsis of the chapters, get a sense of, do you like the way it's done? And you can even, like right now, I'm trying to work towards making an audio book because that's a whole other area. So sometimes you can go on and just little snippets from different books, and it kind of tells you, gee, I think I'd like more of this. But certainly anything that can inspire, we can inspire each other, because as writers, we're sitting around writers here. I think we somehow want to connect with our readers. And if at the same time it can be uplifting, all to the good. So that was kind of my take on it. Thanks.
Mhm.
I can
you,
add
Frank.
something here.
Yes,
Can you,
please.
Go ahead.
can you all hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so far I have written 5 different books, and in my different book, I tell a different story, but try to bring, as I mentioned earlier, something that would make people learn things that I know. My last book is called Live, Die, Live, and it's about reincarnation. By formation, I was a journalist, but I had an uncle that was a parapsychologist. And as I was growing up in life, he kept telling me about reincarnation, or that living this life, that's not all we had. This was a stage of perfection, and then we would be better in the future. men would get better and worse, which obviously is happening. In writing the book, I deliver my message, the message of my uncle, but I build in a few stories of people that had different lives, people that were in a bad accident, and while they're in a coma or something like that, they remember things and they come back and they tell the story before they die. This is where I took my sources to write within the same book the story of 5 persons who were involved with reincarnation. And if I read a book written by somebody else and it keeps me attracted to the book by the way it is written, but mostly by what he is telling me, by amusing me and informing me, then I call it a good book.
Mhm.
Anybody
Well,
agree?
it sounds like,
I agree.
now I agree too. I think there's
Now,
any,
anybody
Definitely.
wondering what the accent is?
I beg your pardon?
Anybody wondering what my accent is?
Yes.
Well, tell me.
Oh, I don't know.
What accent, right? Yeah, my first language is French.
Ah,
I knew
So
it.
I did, yeah.
I
But you
do
didn't
know
say it.
parlez-vous français, but
Je
that's,
parle français.
yeah.
So
je parle
one of
français un peu.
some of my books are in French, some are English, and the last one, Live, Die, Live, is in English.
Ah,
Peter, are you the type of reader who goes online and check for books, or you'd rather go and check physical bookstores?
So far, I will admit I've never been online to check a book. If
Mm,
I feel to buy a book, I will go to a library and read what's at the back of the book, the information that's there. And sometimes I get fooled, sometimes I get a bad book.
mhm.
But where I live, we have a fairly big library, which is free, and we can borrow a book, read it, and take it back.
Well, good for
So I've had a
you.
few bad books, but I've had a few good books.
Has anyone of you
there's a
here?
lot of stuff online now. One can
True.
really,
Yes,
in
there
terms
is.
of, I was looking up all these lists of the 100 best books of the 20th century, for example. And they're interesting lists. They really are. The Pulitzer Prize winners. So that's American authors. There's the Booker Prize winners, and those are international
I hear
authors
you.
who write in the English language. And as I said, they're national book awards of all kinds. And I find those fascinating. I mean, in terms of, I think once in a while you find a poor book among those lists, but it's very, very rare. And generally, you know, if you have a committee reviewing the books and awarding them or putting them on the short list or long list or whatever it is, you're going to find something that will be informative and interesting and will meet whatever your needs are in terms of what you want to learn about or be entertained about or what have you. So I find those awards very, very useful. I was looking at the Pulitzer Prize winning books for the last couple of years, The Night Watchman. I don't know if any of you have read that one by Louise Erdrich, or the Colson Whitehead books that I mentioned, Nickel Boys and The Underground Railroad, and The Overstory, which is about trees and etc. Those are wonderful, wonderful books. I would just recommend looking at some of those lists if you're running out of ideas of your own. Bookstores are great. I always, in bookstores or libraries, I ask if I'm looking for a particular book as a gift. No bookstore, for example, I always ask the clerk, what would you recommend for a 7-year-old or a 25-year-old or somebody who's struggling with whatever? Because I think it's not only interests that we differ, but it's also whatever it is that we're trying to resolve. And books are ways of resolving whatever personal issues we have, whether we're struggling with our husband, our wife, or struggling with health issues, whatever it happens to be. Picking up a book that is a way of trying to deal with those issues, I think is a very healthy way of using literature. I think it sounds like we're all readers to one degree or another. And from the time I was a little kid, I read. And reading was a way of certainly answering questions I had about life, whatever aspect of life. I was thinking about books, and A Gratitude by Oliver Sacks is one of my favorites. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. And then an old book that I remember from when I was in my late 30s and 40s, Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. That's an old one that goes back to 1974, but it's a philosophy book and nature book, and it has a lot of profound insights about life in this world. So, I mean, as I said, trying to figure out what you're trying to resolve and finding a book that might meet that particular need is an important way of choosing a book too, besides, at the list or favorite authors or favorite books, etc. Each of you have a favorite book besides your own.
Well, my favorite books are sort of dated. I like Alexandre Dumas, Victor Hugo, because they were master of the trade, and the way they described the scenes that they were trying to relate to make us relate to, were so well done. They had the time to do it, and they had the talent. Today we try to go so fast, and our mind are so filled with different science and knowledges that we sometimes forget that a comma can be very important in a sentence.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
A comma reminds you to pause. And
That's it.
right? Okay, it makes a lot of difference. Okay. How about let's have Kimmy. Yes.
You said Camille? I lost her.
Yeah.
Voice.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Are we still talking about how to pick a good book? Or
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Me personally, when I'm looking for a book, I look at the color and I look on of course I read the back, and if the first chapter captures me, then I'm gonna buy it. Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes for me. I think I've been like that my whole life. When I was a child, two of my favorite authors were Judy Blume and John Grisham.
Yes.
And so I just think about, they had books that when you look on oh wow, I gotta read that. So, but yeah, something about the first chapter. If it gets my attention, I'm gonna buy it. And then just like sit on the couch with a cup of coffee. Well, back then I wasn't doing that because I was too young for coffee, but yes, to bask in the moment with a good book on the couch. Yeah, definitely.
Kimmy, do you also check with friends for their book recommendations, or you just go ahead and check books yourself?
Both.
Both. Okay. Anyway,
Yes.
Dr. Piorkowski, I do have a question for everyone. What book will you advise someone to read if he's into science fiction? Let's have John. John, what book do you think will you give that person who's into science fiction?
What book would I give that person for fiction?
Science fiction,
Science
yes.
fiction. Science fiction.
Oh, science fiction.
Yes.
Right.
What will you
Oh.
recommend? What title?
It's a good question. I don't read a whole lot of those books. I would probably just say the Alien. I assume they made a book from that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to just add one thing. You had asked what's your favorite book. Well, when I was 10 years old, my aunt gave me a book for the only time in my life she gave me a book for Christmas. It was called The Blue Devil.
The Blue Devil.
By John Henry Cutler. I loved it. And I keep it. I have it today. I kept it in a safe place because it's what spurred me on to read more books.
Uh-huh.
I was enthralled by it. And it was simple. It was a simple book. It was meant for somebody in my age bracket.
Uh-huh. It did its job.
Yeah, it did its job. And I never got another gift from her.
Oh dear.
But
did you tell her you loved the book?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
But I
yes.
didn't do any good. She didn't give me a gift the next year.
Oh, well.
How
Well,
about for those who are suffering from depression and anxiety? What would be a good title for them?
who you talking to?
I'm addressing this to everyone.
Oh,
Anyone?
Just the science fiction one, The Clara and the Sun that I mentioned earlier. That is a wonderful book that's written by a Japanese writer, and it won the book Clara and the Sun.
Clara and the Sun.
Klara and the Sun, right? It's about an artificial friend. So it's science fiction.
well,
Dr. Piorkowski, how about for those who are suffering from depression, what would be a good title for them? I'm asking that question because it's, it's a lot of people are suffering from depression, right? And anxiety, especially, the teenagers, those who can't vent out to their parents, right?
One single one doesn't come to mind, Frank. Dr. Beck years ago, and his work on depression was very, very powerful. But I'm sure there's some more current writers that have written something compelling. I will give it some thought. Go ahead, Bobby.
Bobby?
I don't hear you.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, they had me muted. Anyways, every time that I would ever get bouts of depression and wondering why things happen the way they happen, truthfully, I would go to the Psalms in the Bible, because you've got 150 of them in there. And if you want to talk about some people that were depressed, almost every single Psalm starts out with, oh God, and they're in such dilemma, but it always ends up with, you know what? There's still hope. And so it's one of those things where, and then if you look at the background, because I like to, when I read things, I like to actually look into God. I don't want to take things just at, face value. So why was David so upset? And why was he always having people chasing him? And then you go back into the other books and you find out, okay, well, the king was trying to kill him. His best friend was trying to cover up. His own sons were trying to kill him. His own men were trying to kill. I mean, every time he turned around, there was something going on. And, talk about somebody wanting to be depressed. If anybody's going to be depressed, I think if I was David, I would have just ran off and hid in a cave and stayed there. But everything came around that it was like, okay, you know what? But God. And then all of a sudden people have to have hope. Without hope, we're all just we're hopeless. And it's good to know that there's something somewhere that cares more for us than we can imagine. So yeah, that would be it. And I just want to throw one last thing in, if you guys don't mind, and it has not to do with depression, but many years ago when I was a management for restaurants, a gentleman came in who lives near me locally. This has been, 20 some, maybe 30 years ago. And he had written a book, and it had actually been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and he gave it to me. And it was all about the Cherokee Trail of Tears. Now, I live in Northeast Alabama, and the Cherokee Indians were displaced from Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama, and they were moved to Oklahoma. And of course, the Trail of Tears, so many thousands of them died. Well, he actually walked it backwards. It's called Walking the Trail of Tears by Jerry Ellis. And I thought, man, I don't know. I didn't know that much about Indians in that sense. The only ones I knew were the Seminoles down in Florida, because that's where I was originally from. But I started reading his book, and the fact that he brought every character that he met along that way alive. He would tell you about the people he stayed with. He talked about the blisters on his feet. Can you imagine walking from Oklahoma back to Alabama? And he did that, and it made the story real. And because it was a true story, but I would not have gone into a bookstore and seen that book and said, I think I'll read that, because it wasn't something that I thought would be interesting. But when he gave it to me, and as a friend, I thought, man, okay, I'll read your book. And then when I got into it, I thought, wow, this is incredible. But sometimes, like we were talking about, getting suggestions from your friends. There's so many, like Kimmy, I was talking to her yesterday, we were on together, and she was talking about her book, 43 days. And I mean, I am so intrigued because she's talking about healing and how that she was able to come through a situation that I don't know if I've never had a child or lost a child, but it sounds, you know what? I believe that when I finish her book, I'm going to meet people that I'm going to be able to say, you know what, you need to read this book, and that's where you get referrals. You get referrals from your friends, from people that have read books, from people that have been experiencing those books. And I think a good book, it helps us face today, whether it be instructional with emotions. And that's where every book we read ministers to us somehow, spiritually, mentally, physically, somehow. If that book doesn't feed us, we're just wasting our time.
Amen to
A
that.
good book.
Totally agree
I
with
feel
what you
like
said.
after if you read my book, Bobby, I have a feeling that you'll be calling me with a cup of coffee in your hand. We'll have a discussion.
I'm good for it. I'm telling you, I'm excited about it.
And if
I
you
agree.
read mine, you will know that even if you get
I agree
depressed
with
with
your
this life,
comments.
there's another one coming.
Yes.
I agree with your comments about the Psalms. I just started reading those the last couple of months, and
Oh my
reading
gosh.
them every day.
Yeah.
And honestly, they're very inspirational. You can
Yeah.
just flip through them or see what the day brings in terms of do it at random. And there's something that's uplifting. So that's a
And
good
we're not
one for
alone. Yeah, we're not alone. Everybody suffers loss in some form.
Mhm.
Everybody
Yeah.
suffers heartache in some form. So yeah, good stuff.
Queen Elizabeth's comment that was circulating among the internet was that grief is the price we pay for love. And I thought
Yeah.
that was a very meaningful
That's a
quote.
profound, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is.
Dr.
I think
Piorkowski?
yes.
Yeah. We are an hour already with this session. As much as we would love to continue, we do have other sessions to attend, right? But I do appreciate everyone for attending. And Dr. Piorkowski, thank you so much for moderating the session. So let me just go ahead and mention all the authors who attended the session. We have Bobby, right? We have Dr. Jerry Piorkowski, our moderator. We have John. Hello, John. We have Dr. Clark Batwell, Chukuma, and then
Right.
we have Colin Plummer. All right. Even though he's driving, thank you so much. And then we have Mr. Edward King, Kimmy. All right, Kimmy, and then Mackenzie Samedi, right? Marlene Sampson. Oh, Samedi. Okay. Peter. Peter, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name. Legault.
Lego.
Legault. Okay. And Wilkinson Francois. All right. Thank you so much. Just a quick let's go around the room, and I need everyone to plug in their books. Let's start with Bobby.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I got to go get ready for my booth. All right.
Go.
Okay, I have written this book. It's called, let me get it in the right place there. It's called The Sounds of River's Edge. And if you'll see, it's got a man and a little girl. There we go. And it's true stories about growing up in South Florida along the Intracoastal Waterway. And it's true stories of myself from 4 years old to 8. My sister was 8 to 12. And then, of course, our relationship with our dad. Now, everybody says, well, what about your mom? My mom was there, but my mom was a whole different story. But my dad was, he was a very wise man. I thought he was as dumb as dirt when I was a kid. But as I got older, I thought, my God, my dad was the wisest man I ever knew. But it's stories. The very first one, every chapter is a story of itself. And the very first chapter is called A Leap of Faith, where after watching a cartoon of Bugs Bunny, I jumped off the top of our house with an umbrella. So that just tells you the beginning of where it goes. And then, of course, I also have published with Reader's Magnet. This one, let me see if I get that. Oh, it's called the First Annual Duck Springs Whistling Contest. And it's my first children's book. And I even got to do a lot of the illustrations in it. That's my great nephew, Brandon. So anyways, but if you get a chance and you want to read something entertaining, because, and with my Sounds at River's Edge, every chapter ends bringing it back into not just my father, but our Father, God, and how his love for us never changes.
Thank you so much, Bubby.
Thank you, guys.
Let's
I'm
have
gonna
Chakoma.
go out. I'm still gonna listen, but I'm gonna go out.
No problem. No problem.
All right.
Chakoma.
Yeah, am I muted?
You're good now. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So my name is Dr. Chukuma Chijioke. This is my book. Oh, okay. Walking with God. Sorry, how do I put it?
Okay, there, the center.
Walking with God.
Raise it.
Walking with God, Coming to America, the Promised Land. This book chronicles my victorious journey with God from early childhood, because God has been faithful to me as from early childhood, and also tells about the struggles and triumph over forces of darkness and the generational curse. So this book teaches readers how to hear the voice of God, understand his voice, and also to obey his instructions and see the miraculous work of God in their lives. Also, it teaches readers how to use the keys of the kingdom. The keys of the kingdom are the word of God and the name of Jesus Christ to pray effectively, and also to covenant with the elements of nature like the earth and the sun and the wind, things that God used in the, to be able to overcome forces of darkness and generational causes, protect your family and your business, your health, and also to achieve your God-given destiny. And this book emphasizes that God is a prayer answering God. Also, he is a way maker. He also is a faithful promise keeper, because actually there was a promise he made to me when I was in final year med school that's going to bless me and make me exceedingly rich. But the money is for my less fortunate brothers and sisters. So in 2004, he told me to change my last name. Back home in Nigeria, we call it surname. He told me to change my surname from what it was to from Woke, that was my original surname, to Chijioke. So the Chijioke I'm answering now came into existence in 2004. And God told me to change that name. 2 weeks after obeying that instruction, God miraculously started the process of relocating us from Nigeria to America. And in 2006, he relocated us to this country. So all these are written in this book. And then the readers will know how to hear the voice of God, understand his voice, because he speaks. We are made in his likeness and image. So he speaks to us, and we'll be able to understand how he speaks and then obey his instructions. Also, the instruction he gives us, the ones he has written in his word, and also through his ministers, his apostles, his evangelists, and his prophets. So when you obey these instructions, and it makes it important to know that the work of God, performing a miraculous work in your life, depends on your obedience to his instructions. Without obeying God's instructions, he will not be able to perform his miracles in your life.
I agree.
So,
Chakuma, thank you so much for sharing.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. And they can grab a copy of the book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Now let's have Marlene. Your book title and where they can grab a copy of the book.
Okay. Alrighty. I don't know if, it's not showing up. Okay, the title of my book is Can You See What I See? Envision a Better You and a Better World. And this is for anyone seeking positive change to attain the mindset for resilient and joyful living. Not sure you can see it. It's available on my website, which is msharesamson.com. and it's on any of the online booksellers. It's available there. And as I said, it's got concepts on all different things like choosing not to worry, redefining rejection, living in the present moment, learning how to breathe and smile, and all the little tools for us to be able to follow our path and, do our purpose of being more, because we all strive to be more peaceful. And this just kind of gives some of the tools of how to do that. So again, it's Can You See What I See with an I? Can you see what I see? Envision a better you and a better world.
Would love to grab a copy of that book.
Right. And I do apologize. I have to leave because I have a group that I have to run in like.
That's perfectly fine.
So thank you very much. And I apologize because I would love to hear the rest of the books, but my group can't start without me since I'm the facilitator. So
that's okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. John, you may go ahead and plug your book.
Okay. I just want to say that my book here is called The One-Legged Cowboy. After the Civil War in 1865, most of the young men in the East headed to the West to be cowboys. There wasn't any work for them in the East, so they found out they could make money by being a cowboy. Well, the thing is, when you get to be in your 30s, you're considered an old timer. And my one-legged cowboy is a man who falls down a ravine with his horse and gets a broken leg. And it takes days for him to get back to the ranch. And the rancher's wife cuts off his leg, and he winds up getting the guy in the barn to make a artificial leg for him. So with that in mind, he has to find new work. And out of that, eventually he becomes a deputy in the town nearby. And then he winds up on the trail of some rustlers who go to another town, and he chases them down and winds up capturing them. It's fiction, but it's loaded with some of my own personal feelings and facts and understanding, because I lived in California for 27 years. I can tell you that I was next to a fence watching the FMC drive their trucks around and tanks, and the tumbleweed would blow up beside me. The wind would blow the tumbleweed up around me. It made me think more about the West, and it made me think about this book I want to write. And my grandfather was a cowboy out in Wyoming during the last cattle drive in 1900. So I used him also in writing this book.
All right. Do we have a website where they can grab a copy?
Oh yeah. Right now it's going to be a Barnes & Noble and I believe Amazon.
Okay.
This is my newest one that's coming out soon. It's the Cottage Mystery. Can you see that?
Yes.
Put
it at the center.
That should be good. So I just want to let you know that that's my little thing, is writing fiction for entertainment and enjoyment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Now let's hear it from Kimmy, Little John Clark.
All right. This is my very first book, 43 Days Born to Live. Came out February. It's been a year as of February 23rd. They can be found on Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. It's about my lost journey of losing our infant son, and how you can really just learn how to continue walking with the Lord even after loss. Just seeking him, and he carries you through. Like, I wouldn't be sitting here right now if you did not. So just sharing. This is a topic that a lot of people don't like to talk about. As soon as you say you lost a child, they're like, so, but talking is healing. So
a lot of moms and parents really can relate to you. I was wondering if you have any, if you are planning on having a live booth session in the next few days.
No, I did not make that.
Because that's a very interesting topic that you can talk during your live booth sessions. Anyway, do we have any websites where they can order a copy of this book?
Yes, Barnes and Nobles and Amazon so far. I also have a memory page in his name, Chance's Corner, CHANCZ, Chance's Corner on Facebook, besides my own personal Facebook page. But yes, that's about it for now.
All right.
But yeah, I wish I had done that, but I.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's have Mackenzie.
Yes, my name is Mackenzie Samdi, and my first name means son of a wise leader. It's spelled Macknzy, and my last name is Saturday in French. And I have written 3 books so far, and the first one is The Legacy of My Poems, The Psalms of a King. And the second one is My Psalms, which was an extension of the first one.
Where can our viewers grab a copy of these 2 books?
Oh, the first one is on Amazon, and the second one is in Barnes and Noble and every website.
Okay.
And the third one is A Beautiful Life Well Lived.
Oh, there. So 3 books.
Yes, and
Okay.
I don't know if I can read one of the poems for you guys, because my books are about poetry. The first 2 are about God, and the third one's about my experiences, like identity and mental health. I'm gonna read a poem from the second book. I was dealing with depression at that time, and before I did something to myself, I decided to write it down. This is called God, Can You Hear Me? God, can you hear me? Oh God Almighty, listen to my cry for your presence. God, are you far, near, at a distance, or up there? Oh my Lord, it seems like that you have abandoned your child. Oh Lord, help me with my problems in this life. It seems that I cannot hold on anymore. It seems like I want to die. It seems like all hope is lost. It seems like I can't stand on my own. Help me, because I'm drowning. Help me, take my hand from the pool that I'm sinking in. Just like you took Peter's hands while you were walking on water. Help me, Lord. Don't forsake me. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. That was very inspiring. You know,
And my website is MackenzieThePoet.com.
Mackenzie,
ThePoet.com.
thepoet.com. All right. Now let's have Edward. Edward? Oh, I think it's still muted.
Yeah, I cannot hear him.
You're still muted.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, cool. Yeah. My book is called The Works of Christ, My Proof of God's Existence.
All right. What's the title again? Works of Christ?
The Works of Christ, My Proof of God's Existence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see, back in 2010, I was in a really bad car accident that the doctors didn't even expect me to live past 3 hours from.
So this is based on your personal experience.
Yes.
And
Because
that is your turning point on and the main reason why you were able to publish that book, correct?
That's one of the main reasons I did publish it, yeah. Because actually, while I was in the hospital, I had an incredible out-of-body experience that I want to tell the world.
You can eat.
Okay. Where can they order or grab a copy of this book?
They can get a copy from Amazon, iTunes, or Zulon Press.
Okay. All right. Any website that you want to plug?
Um, well, Zulon Press is the publishers, like zulonpress.com, and then
Okay.
they can search up the title.
All right. Dr. Piorkowski, I'll be asking you for your takeaway. You'll be the finale. All right. But before that, let's have and Peter and I'm lacking one. Peter and Colin to give us or to have them plug their books. Let's start with you, Colin.
Yes, very quick. With my book, it took me 40 years to write it. And then I received
40.
40 years, because I
Oh.
developed those life-saving products 40 years ago. So it was like that many years. And then I decided to write the book because of George Floyd being choked. But the main thing about it is, it's God sent, or patience is the virtue, when you see that I won 2 big-time awards. I won the Who's Who Award of America, which Warren Buffett gets these type of awards, okay? And I won the Millennium Award of Who's Who. So that's in the world. So I actually made history, and it's finally patience is the virtue. And I told the Lord even then, you see how they ripped me off? And you know what the Lord told me? If you talk to the Lord long enough, he'll answer you. And you'll know that it's the Lord. The Lord told me, Colin, it's not about the money. Look at all the lives you're saving per day. And that really struck to me. And then when I tell people about my book, there was like 3 guys that opened up their shirt and showed me open heart surgery. And that sets such a feeling within me is unbelievable. And that's all I have to say. So read my book and you'll understand and you'll start thinking outside the box.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's have Peter.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, too bad you can't see me because I cannot show you the book. But let me say it this way. When I was very young, I was very curious. I wanted to know everything. If Dad told me that we had to stop on the red light and move on the green light, I wanted to know why. And he couldn't explain it to me. I wanted the green one to stop us. Anyway, I searched all my life, but one of my first questions that I had, why am I here? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of life itself? And I searched and studied and talked to many priests or psychologists or whatever. My daughter's a psychologist. And I came to the conclusion that what we're living now is not the end. It's just a passage. It's like my body is a car and I am the driver in my car. If I crash this car, destroy this car, and get into another car, the new car does not show the mileage that I have, experience that I have, but the new car is my new body, and I'm the same soul within that car. So my new book, which I call, and I'll repeat, Live, Die, Live, tries to prove in many ways that, yes, we were born. Yes, we will die. And yes, we will be born again. It explains so many things to me. Take Beethoven. How could a kid of 5 years old write sonata? Or all the other people that are prodigue, that know so many things so very young? Is because they bring their talent from previous life into the present life. I have 40 years of research, maybe more, in this book. And I can't say that I believe every word, but every 2 words anyway. Anyway, the book is called Live, Die, Live. It's on sale at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And no, I don't have the website yet. My other books have different names. My other most popular book in the past was called Ultimate Warning. It's also a kind of a dealing between us and what we do to Mother Earth and life itself. But let's concentrate on Live, Die, Live, because I think it's my better book.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing. Now, with you guys sharing, what your books are, right? Basically, how do you choose the question? How do you choose a good book to read? Is again when this book feeds you, right? When this book inspires you, educates you, makes you learn it, right?
Yes.
Now, last but not the least, our moderator, Dr. Piorkowski, for her takeaways for this session.
Thank you. I think I did mention my book early on, Beyond Pipe Dreams and Platitudes. It's kind of fading here and there. No, but I think everybody reads to meet their own needs, and in some ways, whether it's a need for entertainment, whether it's a need for new information, whether it's a need for help or assistance in terms of solving their depression or their sadness or their anxiety. And I think reading has so many worthwhile positive functions that it's something that we all should do. I think for all of us who are authors, writing is really a cathartic experience. It gives us an opportunity to present feelings and ideas, thoughts in our head that we have not shared with anybody else, and to let ourselves be more transparent and known to the world. Even if it's a book about something that doesn't sound very autobiographical, it still relates to our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own beliefs about people and the world. So I think everybody had an opportunity to share, and their choices of a good book certainly varied a great deal. As I said early on, I think book clubs help. I think awards help. Books that get awards, books that are on lists, going into bookstores and looking around and seeing what strikes you, et cetera. So there are a number of different ways of choosing good books, and ultimately it has to be something that is satisfying to the individual person.
All right. Thank you. I agree.
Thank you.
What a very interesting discussion. All right. So, thank you so much, dear authors. Tomorrow we'll have another set of discussion scheduled at 11 a.m. Eastern. We have Creating a Great Villain, and scheduled tomorrow at 5 p.m. we have What Makes You Not Finish a Book. All right. Very interesting topic. So again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for attending the
Thank you.
roundtable discussion, and hope to meet you again tomorrow for another round of roundtable discussion.